Okay, welcome to the Norwood Conservation Commission meeting for February 20th, 2019. If anybody has a recording device, please let us know. Opening roll call.
Peter Bamber.
Joe DiMaria.
John Gear.
Lee Leach.
Cheryl Doyle. Chris Capizio.
Steve Washburn.
Al Getz.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, there was an indication of a recording device.
Okay, yep. Okay, first on the agenda is notice of intent
Open it. Thank you.
for United Consultants Incorporated representing DCD Realty, DEP file number 2510503, Norwood number N201814, project location 84 Moore Street. Al?
Okay, we've had a peer review done, and they've been working with the consultants for the project. And I think you have copies of the peer review reports and the change of plans. And there's a couple of things that we have to look at. Under the statute and the regulations, the site falls under riverfront redevelopment, and the specifications for that are quite different from if it was a new site. The first paragraph in the regulations for redevelopment basically tells us that the end result cannot use more of the site than was previously used at some point in time, and that it has to show improvement to the environment over what is there at the present time. So that's where the starting point is, and in my opinion, if through this process we can get the river in that area, the banks and the river itself cleaned of unnatural materials, things that don't belong there, and invasive species, and restored to a natural bank with natural vegetation. And if we can achieve a reasonable, because the Act calls for reasonable, stormwater system that cleans the stormwater before it's discharged into the river, because at the present time there's absolutely no stormwater system, and everything that's dirty goes into the river. So if we can achieve those goals through this project, we will have made a contribution to improving conditions in that part of the river. Previously, across the street, across Moore Street, we have achieved considerable improvements to the river as it flows through that project. That's not completed yet across the street, but it's already a big improvement over what existed there previously. So those are the things that we have to be considering, looking towards environmental improvements and such. That's my view, and I think we should hear from Mark, the consultant that we approved from LEC to explain his peer review. Is Mark here?
He's right behind you.
Right behind me. So I don't have eyes back there.
Mark, would you like to explain your peer review?
Sure. So we initially reviewed the project and issued a peer review letter on December 19th. And that included a review of the performance standards for the work in the riverfront area, the wetland delineation at the site, and then engineering comments on the stormwater management system. In the meantime, the applicants have provided us with revised plans, actually 2 times, I believe, since then. They've addressed a number of our comments. They did add some significant riverfront area restoration in the form of cleaning up some areas that are in really rough shape on both sides of the property and both sides of the river, some plantings, and that came into us in another submittal. We issued a second review letter, February 4th, I believe it was, which reviewed that restoration plan and reviewed the engineering a second time. We found that the restoration plan for the riverfront area was much better. We recommended that they expand it slightly between one of the stormwater basins and the river to clean up an additional area that's in the riverfront area that is pretty severely degraded. They did submit a revised plan for that area and did address that. So as far as the riverfront area restoration piece of this, I'm satisfied that they've addressed our concerns. The engineering concerns, we were left with a handful of additional concerns, which were summarized in our most recent letter. I think they've been in the process of working those out, not 100% finished with those, but as far as the peer review goes, we're down to some engineering issues that need to be worked out to ultimately satisfy the peer review.
Okay, would you like to address those? Or?
Yeah, basically I've got 4 copies of 2 different letters. I hadn't really had a chance to make copies.
You should announce yourself.
From the, excuse me?
You should announce yourself.
Oh, Jim Susi with United Consultants. Sorry. The top letter is the response to the comments we had received from the commission. And then the package behind those 2 sheets.
Clean this out?
No.
I'll give that to Al.
Okay.
Are the responses to
got one?
LEC's latest review letter. I've addressed everything except for one issue that had to do with the flood zone filling in capacity. They asked for an incremental study to be done on that, so that's the only thing I have not completed as far as their last comment letter. So hopefully those will go out to them into Atlantic tomorrow, and they will have a chance to finally go through it. Excuse me, I think if they have any other comments after that, we may just be able to handle that with a phone conversation or an email to try to clean things up. We have made a couple of significant changes. One mainly had to do with the rain gardens and using them for TSS removal. We're no longer using them for TSS. We did have up in the bus lot, we had a grid separator that went between that and that, so that end was kind of covered. So what we've done on the back side of the building where all those rain gardens came into a manhole and then into the infiltration pond, we've replaced the manhole with a helical separator. That will give us 80% TSS removal prior to infiltration. So that should take care of, there was a couple of 3 comments that had to do with that. Couple of the other ones, there was another area up against the railroad bed that he wanted added into the drainage analysis, so we've expanded the areas that correspond to those drainage areas, and we've rerun the drainage report again based on that. Other than that, I think that was pretty much the big stuff from Rick's comments. And like I said, the biggest one really is the incremental flood storage, which is gonna take a little bit.
Yeah, we haven't reviewed,
Mm-hmm.
I just got that tonight myself, so we
Right,
haven't
so-
reviewed the responses yet.
Okay.
So I think we're very close, and again, I can get the revised plan set and the drainage report and everything off to them tomorrow. And then when I finish the incremental study, I can send that off under separate cover, because it's really not tied into the plan set.
Okay. Anybody here, any questions or comments?
Oh, I was just gonna make a motion.
Okay.
That we continue the hearing then, to allow them to get us another set of updated plans and allow us to be able to see, hear, read the response comments.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Oh, hold on, what, to what date, time?
What
Be the
date?
next date?
Next issue reads March 6th.
So
I
March
believe.
sixth, seven
March
thirty?
6th. Will you actually have the plans though beforehand?
I
So
should
we
have the
don't,
plans to them tomorrow.
tomorrow, okay. So can you make sure that Ramonda has them too?
Yes.
Because we keep continuing this on you guys, and we'd like all the information all at once, so we
Yes.
could just nip it in the bud and be done with it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you, March sixth then,
Yep,
Yes.
7:30.
7:30, okay.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I-
David,
One
do you have a
matter, Mr.
comment?
Chairman, a matter of housekeeping, if I could. David Hearn, attorney for the applicant. We've had some changes in personnel related to this project. I just wanted to give the commission a couple of letters. Mr. Clemmy, who had been representing the applicant, has now moved to a full-time position at Subaru New England. And Tim McGilvray, who's here in the back row, the letter refers to him as the vice president. He'll be the point person for
Okay.
the applicant on that. So I wanted to make sure the commission knew that Mr. McGilvray was here and that he will have responsibility for this project because of the change in personnel.
Very good, okay. So, we're all set with you folks for tonight.
Is it anticipated there'll be any more comments coming from the commission, or,
If there are, they'll follow up immediately. We'll get them before the meeting.
yeah? All right, and otherwise,
We'll continue the way we've been going. That seems to be working pretty well.
doing the best we can.
Yep.
Yeah, March 6th at 7:30. One more question, Mr.
Yep.
If, I guess the question Mr. Susi is wondering, and I join in that. If we have everything resolved with LEC in advance of the 6th,
Mm-hmm.
would there be benefit in having a draft order for everybody, a draft order of conditions for everybody to consider? In the interest of
I don't know.
time,
What do you-
in the
what do you
interest of
think, Al?
focusing on the issue.
Well, without the final material, it's pretty difficult to,
No, but if we have the final,
Yeah.
if we have the plans, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Mr. Getz.
yeah.
If we have the plans to LEC within the next day or two, as we expect, right, Jim? And they have an opportunity to review it, and Mr. Susi and the LEC folks can go back and forth if they have to, and copying Ms. Morgan, I suppose, on these things, would that give you, in the 2 weeks between now and then, the opportunity to
That
start to
wouldn't,
put it together?
that wouldn't give me any time to consider the comments that are made by this board at next week's, 2 weeks hearing.
Well, we have to take our ages.
Yeah. Did you have a comment, Joe?
I have a question. There's, in terms of replication for a wetland in this particular area is a 1-to-1 replication for areas that have been disturbed. And there's a 2-to-1 replication requirement for areas that have not been disturbed or being redone. I have not seen on a plan an area that defines the areas that have been developed as opposed to those who have not been developed. I don't know that,
Now, all good questions, but as a point of order, we've closed the hearing. So
Yeah.
does that mean you should submit that to
Submit
Ramonda
that.
as a question?
well, that
It was
was
submitted.
submitted.
Okay.
I haven't
so-
seen an answer.
So until we receive the plan, so to Al's point and your point, then we need to see the final plans.
Yep. Okay.
I appreciate that the substantive discussion should be held off until, because we continue the hearing. We just want to, I'm just asking questions on procedural matters, so we have roadmap to
Yeah.
use. That's all.
Yep.
But if the commission thinks that it might be premature to start drafting something in advance of the 6th, I'm not asking you to do it before you see the latest plans. I'm just saying between now and the 6th, you're likely to see plans very soon. Would that give some time to get started? That's all. That's the
Yeah.
question, and I'll leave it to the commission.
Yeah, okay,
Well, Mr. Getz opposes that, so
Yeah.
I'm not inclined to go against him.
Well, thought we'd ask.
yep,
All right,
doesn't hurt to ask.
not usually, but.
Now,
are the-
question along those lines there. Should we try to have our wetlands person here to explain the nuts and bolts of Mr. DeMaria's question? It's a little above my pay grade, and I just thought that we're,
Any means to answer the question should be utilized.
Yep,
Yeah, sure.
okay, because I mean, we did kind of answer them. You know, Mark has reviewed Brad's reports and has agreed with them, so me as a layperson would assume that we have met the criteria of the act, but if we need to have
can't hurt.
Brad come in to
Yep.
go through it.
Or ask him for,
Mark,
No, he should be here.
yeah,
Yeah,
Mark, did you have
I
something
was
to
just
say?
gonna make a suggestion that if Brad has responses to any of the concerns that Mr. DeMaria put into writing, then I think it would be most efficient if he puts his responses into writing. That way they're submitted to the commission, I can look
Exactly.
at them.
that's where I'm
Okay.
going.
Yeah.
So, right.
Good,
All right,
very good,
thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
I need a business card from Mr. McGill.
okay,
We didn't do it all in.
what's that?
We made the motion. We didn't finish it.
We voted on
We
it.
voted on it.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we did. We voted on it.
I don't remember.
Thanks.
Yeah, we did.
You did vote.
We
There's all in
did.
favor, there's been no opposed questions.
It was,
I heard a second.
But there is one
Sure.
right,
opposed.
To what?
well, we
I
took
was
a,
asking if you
We
had-
took a vote on the
You had-
extension.
It wasn't unanimous, you didn't ask for
Oh,
those opposed,
okay.
there was one opposed.
Okay,
so. it
So now we
was
know.
6-1.
okay.
Okay, we're all set. See you in
Thank
2
you.
weeks.
Okay, so, next on the agenda is Norwood Engineering representing Paul Listan,
you, sir.
Vanderbilt Realty Ventures LLC, DEP file number 2510504, Norwood number 201901, project location 290 Vanderbilt Ave. We have an email from them requesting continuance of the hearing till March 6th,
I have a problem.
2019.
The problem I have is that in the last set of plans, it is indicated that the abutter is the town of Norwood. It's on the plan.
I know, it is.
It is. It says town of Norwood.
To conservation, right?
It is.
We need some sort of confirmation from them, if in fact the abutter is the town of Norwood. And if the abutter is the town of Norwood, then they need permission from the town of Norwood to build on that, on the Norwood property, which is what they plan to do.
So is that something you could check into, Al?
Yeah, I guess we can.
Okay.
Because he said he had a document.
It is.
You read a
Well, no,
document.
That's another document on the other side. But lot 69
Right,
is
so
conservation
I saw that.
land, and that butts this side.
Right,
And it
on the left.
popped up, yep.
Okay, so you can hash
Right,
that out with them
yeah.
and get some answers on that, Al, if you would. So, do I have a motion on a continuance?
I make a motion, we continue.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Is that at 7:45 on March 6th?
Yeah.
Okay, so, we got a couple of minutes, but I don't want to rush Paul, so.
Do you wanna skip to number 8, because mine is so short.
Go ahead, go for it.
Okay. We had to do some revisions to our submittals, so we're in the progress of resubmitting. We had met with Mark Schubert for our parking to try to get that to meet the handicap part. John, Al, and Mark had met on the lot, and then we need a sort of like a pretty picture, so I have somebody illustrating a pretty picture to submit with it. And then Ramonda and I will do the PowerPoint for town meeting. But there's also going to be a like a public hearing, because we have to present these also. So that's all where we are.
All right.
Has that public
7:50.
hearing date been set yet, Cheryl?
Yeah, March
Ignore
16th,
that.
I think.
Oh, okay. So we're good now. So
Hold
now
on,
we can
okay.
move on to the next item. This is a request for extension order of conditions. Conoco Engineering and Science, representing Boston Gas Company Town Order, N201709, project location, Moore Street and Pleasant Street, Norwood, Mass.
Good evening, I'm Mike Toohill from Conoco Engineering and Scientists.
Good evening.
Hi. We have an order of conditions we had, Boston Gas had an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission under both the bylaw and the state act to put a gas main in Moore Street. And because of delays due to the strikes, I think, the Boston Gas strikes, that didn't get done this fall. The schedule is now this spring. In the meantime, the local order expired in December. The state order is still valid. And we're asking that the commission entertain a motion or a request from us to extend the local order of conditions for another year so that we can do the work this spring.
Okay, Al?
Well, this is another example of where we should have the town order and the state order both the same expiration date, but a lot of times in the past, and it's hurt us on vegetation management plan too. We have not warned people ahead of time that the town order is only for 1 year, and this is one of those cases where it's caused a problem. So.
Cheryl?
Because it expired back in December, those orders of conditions are null and void. You have to refile
Under the bylaw.
for the Norwood part.
Yes, and we're asking this commission to make an exception to that and allow us to continue for a year under the bylaw because we have a valid order under the Wetland Protection Act.
Do we have that authority, Al?
I don't know the answer to that.
We haven't done it. We've been having people refile. If it was just like a day or something, we've considered. But they've all been refiling.
So the
Because
the precedent is
Yeah,
refile.
it's dead in the water. It's null and void. It's non-existent.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Oh, no, it doesn't, but it doesn't exist because it expired.
Right. Okay, so we'd be refiling under the bylaw alone?
Yes.
Because we have a valid order?
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. And we'd have butter notices and everything under the bylaw, the same way we would under the Wetland Protection Act? And do we have filing fees under the bylaw in addition?
You're basically, yes.
Everything's new
yes,
under the
yes,
bylaw.
Yes,
Yes, yes, yes.
yes.
Okay.
Sorry, you are.
That's okay, I had to
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah. Okay,
All right, thank you.
all right. All
Next
right.
filing is the 6th. Do you know the next filing date?
No, if you had everything today, I would say yes, but if not.
No, I don't mean for the hearing, I mean is the next filing, I know I missed today's filing date, is the next filing date
No, it would be the 20th.
the 20th? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Paul. You're up.
Good evening. I want to talk to the commission tonight about four different things. As you know, the chairman of the Trails Committee, when it was the subcommittee of the commission, has filed 3 community preservation applications
those applications kind of went away, or they have been modified, and I've taken over the responsibility to complete a couple of those projects. And that's what I wanted to discuss with the commission tonight. The first was what should be considered basic trail maintenance for the ND Woods property. As you probably are aware, there are a few wet spots on the ND Trail. And I've had some conversations with Al and with John Gear about how to approach dealing with the wet spots and managing this into the future. I asked, so what we have discussed was a couple of different approaches to handling crossings, pedestrian crossings, over 3 or 4 wet areas on the trail. These alternative approaches, one might be involve placing some crushed stone. Another approach would be to build some low type boardwalks along the trail. Right now, there's 3 or 4 areas that are pretty muddy, and it's kind of causing ongoing environmental damage by leaving it that way. And as you know, the trail is fairly popular, and in the fall, it's used by the Norwood High School cross-country team. So it makes some sense to try to get the trail in better shape for the spring. I put the question to Al whether or not I would need to file a notice of intent or request a determination for the trail management, the trail repair work. And he felt that it was a question that needed to be posed to the commission. So that's the first thing on my list for tonight, is to ask whether or not the wetland crossing in those areas only staying on the trail, not outside the trail, whether we can handle that with simply an RDA, or whether you'd like me to go forward and put together a full notice of intent filing.
Is this
Well,
simple maintenance?
No, I think basically what we have had in the past is on those trails many years ago, we were able to get tailings or portions of shingles that were manufactured in Norwood, and they're little, look like
Shingle tabs.
shingle tabs. Were donated to the town and spread on the trails without going through a whole lot of a whole lot of paperwork. Unfortunately, the state got wind of it, and we had to have it removed. So I think it behooves us to follow all of the procedures for work in a wetland, even though it is a commission piece of property, based on what we've seen in the past.
My personal opinion is that, having been out on the trail several times, a lot of the issues that are creating the water, particularly on one section of the path, are just housekeeping. There are existing culverts that are clogged that need to be cleaned. A simple, just putting some gravel down, some heavy gravel in a couple of spots will solve some problems without any impact, any negative impact on anything. But a lot of it's housekeeping.
Again, if there's a wetland plant growing where you're gonna put some gravel,
Well, there's nothing,
that's a
anything
problem.
that needs maintenance, there's nothing growing there, it's a path. So that's
Well,
just
why
my
I was asking,
opinion.
you're allowed to do maintenance.
How do you feel about it, Al?
I think the worst place probably needs one or two culverts installed under the surface and some crushed stone on top of them to allow the flow of water from one side of the path, the trail. And it's more than a path, it's a wide,
Yeah, it's
wide enough to drive
8
a
feet
tractor
across,
or
yeah.
a truck, and we need to have it, for that purpose, we have to have, whoever's mowing it, right now, it's Bob Malloy, mows it with his tractor, and we need to have whatever we do there wide enough and strong enough to have a vehicle go across it. I'm sure that, God forbid, if we had a fire out in that woodland sometime, the fire department would want to be able to drive a truck across there, so. So that's, one of those is the worst one, and I guess there's another issue involved. It keeps coming up that it's conservation land. Well, some of it's conservation land, some of it's school department land, and some of it's recreation department, okay? And I don't know where the, I hate to say it, I don't know where the property lines are. I don't know whose jurisdiction one or the other. And if we had some kind of a formal filing, whether it's a determination of applicability or a full notice, that would have to be brought about. But that's the worst place. It needs something. And some of the water has, in that flow of water, has culverts upstream of that area. And probably there should be a couple of 12-inch pipes going under the surface right there. So, and right now there's some pallets that somebody dropped in place, and they're floating, and they're not, you know, a normal person with normal shoes is not gonna walk across there because they're gonna get muddy or wet, so.
they're actually a hazard, they're broken.
Yeah, they're a hazard, and we have to, since it's open to the public, I think we have to do better than a couple of pallets, even new pallets. I think we have to do better, so.
What's your opinion on filing?
I think we have to have something
Okay.
for that worst spot. The other spots, I think it's maintenance, but the worst spot is, I think it's a little more.
So a finding on the areas that require installation of culverts or anything along those lines is what you're.
And I would say maintenance doesn't always come into that, you know, improvement. Culverts are an improvement where I would think you'd want to stick to the filing.
I think any kind of fill would be.
Yeah.
An improvement, right,
Kind of
exactly.
fill.
So,
The act says fill, dredge, or alter, so if
right.
we're gonna
Yep.
fill,
Okay. So we need to come up with a game plan then.
Well-
So is that something we should do through the Public Works or along with them? Come up with a plan and then
Well-
file on it, or?
You have to ask each of the entities that have land out there, because if you're at the head end of the trail, that's recreation.
Well,
If you step over, that's school department, and then it kind of wiggles a little bit. And if you're coming off from Mylod Street and then coming into it, it's mostly us, and then we pick up the upper tip corner that connects to the school. But we never ever directly connect to recreation. The school divides us from that.
So how would we work that? Would we have it mapped out and determine what we're gonna do and have the town make the filing on behalf of those three entities, or
I think so.
Yeah.
does that seem reasonable?
This question, Mr. Chairman, how long has this trail been in existence?
I don't know.
So nobody has ever tried to maintain the trail? It's been around 10 or
Well,
15 years?
It
According-
belongs to different entities.
According
So who
to
pays
Al,
for it?
We've been
Malloy
maintaining
mows
it.
it.
Yeah.
First, school department maintained some of it where kids would walk on the way home or to school and things like that. And we have paid Bob Malloy to mow a lot of these open paths. But some of those paths and open trails probably date back to when it was part of the Indian farm. And I don't go back that far.
There's a cement bridge that predates the,
Well,
the
cement
acquisition.
bridge- The cement bridge I'm responsible for. I know about the cement bridge. I had the opportunity and I said, yeah, okay, you have that piece of cement, put it right there. So I'm responsible for that. And there was no alteration needed. It was just drive it in with a big tractor and put it in place. So there was no alteration. And I, as I say, I'm responsible for that cement bridge.
I mean, wouldn't it just be simple enough to, for the areas that require a filing, to file those particular ones as the town, and then the remainder falls under simple maintenance?
And then we could have a continuing condition that allows maintenance forever.
Well, I mean, the long part that runs parallel to the tracks, for example, okay? That needs some upgrading, but that's an easement
That's
for the sewer. There's a sewer line right there
sewer
that needs
line.
to be maintained, so
Yeah.
that's gotta be taken care of as well,
Probably under the easement conditions.
yeah. So,
So that one is not a worry. The
No.
one that goes off of that gets in,
that's the one that's a problem.
yeah.
And we don't know who owns that land.
I don't know where our land starts and the school department or the rec department.
It
in that
zigzags. It's not like this is a straight line, this is a straight line. When you get, if my back was to the bathhouse and you're looking up and say, take the rec part out of it and you're only doing the school and the conservation, for some reason it'll go a hard jag this way, then this way, and then it comes back up and then it crosses over the one easement. And then you gotta find out what is the right of way on the railway too, because they come so many feet off of what the MBTA owns. And unfortunately, nobody's ever bound any of it. I don't know if maybe we could ask Andy, because he's a licensed surveyor, maybe he can go out and just do like little, not bound, but like just stake it, so we basically have somewhat of an idea, since it just kind of mushed together.
Well, I'm sure that there must be something that is already documented.
Oh, in the archives somewhere? Yeah.
Parcel data for those areas?
Oh, yeah, we can figure out the property lines
No
pretty
problem.
quickly. And we can prepare whatever kind of plan the commission would like to see. But and file it however you want it filed, or whether you want separate filings. This is pretty basic trail maintenance, so I don't think we need to get overcomplicated or follow a regulatory process that may not be necessary for trail maintenance. I understand from what Al just said that Mr. Malloy mows the trail. If there's a wetland plant in the trail, I would say then it gets its head cut off. And I don't know whether that mowing is part of any orders and conditions that have been issued in the past. So I'm first trying to figure out, how have you done this before, and let's just follow the way that has been handled before. But if you tell me you don't remember ever having dealt with this particular issue before, then we'll just approach it, take a logical approach of each area that needs to have a better crossing and handle that separately, and we'll work with the engineering department to get that done. But I would like to, at the end of that process, request that the commission approve a management plan for the property, so that we don't have to revisit this every 3 years or every time a new puddle emerges that, you know, it triggers a new filing. This is very basic property maintenance that needs to take place.
I agree.
Any questions on that, or? The worst area, which is the low area that comes beyond that first culvert, that, where the pallets are, that's actually a liability. Whoever owns it, whether we own it or somebody else
Well,
owns it.
somebody
doesn't-
made an announcement on TV during one of their meetings that they're the ones that put the pallets there.
Well,
So
regardless of who
they-
put them
they
there, it's a
should go and
liability,
get 'em
so,
out. Oh, no, it is a
needs to
big
be addressed.
liability.
If you can tell me who that is, we can contact them and ask them to remove it.
I can do that.
We'll put it out there.
On the filing though, if the rec department and the school doesn't have a problem, can't we just do it as,
A town-owned.
Town.
yeah, a
It's just town
town,
owned. Yeah,
yeah,
we can
just
definitely do
a,
that.
one
One
filing?
from the town.
For town
Because
prop-
we're
for
gonna
the-
do what we
for the
do when
town property.
when anybody else comes before us, that's the town. It's the filing and we waive the fees normally on it, and then we just keep going with it.
And I give a continuing condition to
Yeah.
maintain it.
Right.
I would anticipate that, since the commission has a budget that includes things like property maintenance, that the process of developing the plans that need to be filed with the commission would be paid for from the commission's account to manage its own property.
But then, okay, I have a question then. You just Pandora boxed me. If part of it belongs to rec and part of it belongs to school, and Concom does have a lot of property, shouldn't they cost share on maintaining parts of this? And it should not come out of all of Concom, because it's just gonna wipe us out. We don't have a big maintenance budget to start with.
If the work is on someone else's property, that would make sense, but I think that, you know, this is very straightforward.
If we come
No,
up,
I get, no, I get
We
it.
just made it complicated.
$5,800.
No, but
if we come up with a plan and ask Public Works to, from an engineering standpoint, to help us out with that, and we implement it ourselves, even some of the labor volunteers, as long as we file on it, that should be satisfactory. Doesn't necessarily have to cost the town anything out of pocket to plan it, per se.
Yeah,
not
and-
for planning it.
So
I would
this
like
is
to think
straightforward.
that we can utilize some volunteer labor, if we have people from the Trails Committee that are
That's my
eager
motion.
to do some work, and, so I can work with the engineering department to come up with a plan, and I can file a request for determination, if that's
Right.
acceptable, and we'll take it from there.
I mean, it would come out of our $10,000.
I think that sounds like a plan, so we need to move forward on it, right?
Correct.
So, do we need a motion on that, or?
No?
No, okay. What else, Paul?
Thank you. So the other project that Joe Greeley had submitted involved installing a number of Trailhead Kiosks. And what I'm gonna suggest is that we try to tie this into this project to do improvements to the ND Woods Trail. And I think we'll be able to get a design that's suitable, and we can identify a location and put that in the request for determination. And what needs to go in the kiosk is a map showing the property, where the trails are, the length of the trail, and any rules and regulation that the commission has for the use of the property, you know, no fires, no drinking, no stuff like that. And so I'd like to kind of tie that into the project as a trail maintenance, trail improvement for the ND Woods property.
We have some kiosks out there that the Boy Scouts installed,
They're
but they've never
graffiti.
been maintained.
Nope, they're all graffiti.
unfortunately, that is what happens with these things. So I just wanted to let you know that I would anticipate trying to include that as part of this. The next thing that I want to talk about is two additional projects that were submitted to the Community Preservation Committee. Originally, the first project was submitted as a trails master plan study for the entire town. That would have involved hiring like a landscape architect to analyze all of the public properties where trails could potentially be developed and to put together a master plan. After doing some research on that, we decided to kind of go in a different direction. And what I discussed with the Community Preservation Committee last week, and they unanimously voted to support allowing me to modify that Trails Master Plan project to a trail design project. And what I'd like to do next is to point you in the direction of two things. There's a memo that I provided to you dated February 12th that says draft scope of work, like that. And then there's a PowerPoint presentation that I gave last week, and I decided not to break out the projector on the screen for the commission tonight. But these two things, the memo and the presentation, are pretty much one and the same. And I wanted to take 5 minutes and just kind of walk you through what I'm proposing to do with that trail design project. And I'm going to be working off of the blue PowerPoint presentation. As you know, there is a tract of land off of University Ave that comprises 6 parcels of land, one of which is owned by the Conservation Commission. The other parcels were purchased recently. They're known as the Walker property, and they were purchased in connection with a project that the Light Department had, and the acquisition was actually mitigation that was required by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the Light Department's project a couple of years ago. These projects, these properties are shown on page 2 at the top, and they're highlighted in yellow. The sum total is over 102 acres of land off of University Ave. What we're proposing to do is to seek funding at the May town meeting for retaining a landscape architect to develop a trail design plan for these parcels. And the scope of work, which starts on page 3, consists of completing a cost estimate for construction of low-impact passive recreation trails. The two sites, one is the University Ave property, and the other is the land at the end of the Saint Streets. I'm going to come back to that later. The scope of work for the landscape architect would include inventorying and assessing the two properties for trail development, to provide maps of the trail routes, identify locations that have scenic views, identify portions of the trail that can be handicap accessible, identify where wetlands and stream crossings will be needed, design and cost estimate for construction of any bridges or low boardwalks for those wetland crossings, trail construction cross-sections and cost estimates for the trail surface materials, identifying the locations for resting spots or benches, provide a cost estimate for construction of a possible viewing platform that could be located near locations that have scenic vistas, develop cost estimates for a parking lot, identify locations for parking lots, create a design for trail markers, identify locations for outdoor education interpretive signs that can provide information about the history of the property and the fauna and flora on the property. And then there's a picture of an interpretive sign at the top of page 6. Design and develop a cost estimate for Trailhead Kiosks, cost estimates for creating color maps of the trail systems that could be provided at the kiosks for hikers, identifying locations of any existing utility easements, assess the feasibility of developing any trail connections with adjacent properties, and this would include possibly trails in adjacent communities. The reason why we decided to change the project scope was that we felt that this would enable us to move forward with developing some trails a year or two faster than the original approach of a town-wide trail master plan. And this would enable us to put the community preservation funds to work sooner than later and create some trails that the people in town have told us that they'd like us, to see more of. It would enable us to show some tangible results quicker from the community preservation fund. And I think that it would be easier to sell a trail design project at town meeting than an overall trail master plan, which when completed would be a study, but not an action plan to go forward. One of the, after the trail designs have been completed, we would be able to take certain elements of the design and reuse them at other properties. The way the National Park Service or the Appalachian Mountain Club manages their trails is they brand them. You know that when you're in a national park and you see a brown sign with white lettering, you're in a national park. You know what, if you're on an Appalachian Mountain Club trail and you see a green marker or a red triangle, you know that that's the trail associated, that you're on the right track. And once we had designs for trailhead kiosks, for wetlands crossings, for viewing platforms, we could take these designs and replicate them on other conservation properties or other public properties where we want to develop trails in the future. So we could take, the cut sheets and the designs and reuse them over and over again. So we felt that this was the best approach going forward to develop signs and trail markers that would be consistent across all of the town's properties. There are actually, in discussing it with Al, there's brown signs that are up on some of the conservation properties, and we can look at following that same design so that we can be consistent. People know when they're on trails that are owned and managed by the Conservation Commission and the town. So when I mentioned earlier that we presented this alternative project to the CPC last week, they unanimously voted to support it. I'm currently in the process of trying to get a cost estimate from a landscape architect so that we can use that cost estimate when we go to town meeting to seek funding for the project. If the commission thinks that this is a good approach, I would welcome a vote to support the project going forward for town meeting. If you want to have some more time and talk about it later, that's fine with me, but I wanted to come to the commission, explain what we're doing here, and all of this, the project that I just kind of walked you through was a project that Al and I have discussed, and Chairman John Gear and I have discussed, and we think that this is a good approach. I also included in your packets, I think, a memo from Tony Mazzucco. I've talked to Tony about the project, and he agrees that it makes a lot of sense, and so I do have a letter of support from the town manager on the project.
I'm fully in favor of it, but people can decide if they want to talk about it.
Anybody got any questions for Paul?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I agree with you, Peter, too. I think this is a much better approach for reasons that you laid out. Just one comment, though, on it. We recently, the Trails Committee recently had a public presentation up at the library, and one of the feedbacks was accessibility by special needs. I didn't see any mention of that, and at least the university property. So I wanted to just make sure that there is a sentiment for special needs, accessibility to trails.
I agree, and we talked about this last week, and I explained that it's not feasible or practical to try to make an entire trail handicapped accessible due to grades.
Yeah, I understand, but I mean, in terms of the, you're looking at the design, and that's when you want to consider it, if at all possible.
So we absolutely will consider that, and the design approach is gonna be to identify a portion of a trail from a parking lot that has a handicapped parking space and a trail material that is
It's appropriate.
compliant with the American Disabilities Act to try to create a section of a trail that could be ADA compliant. And that section of the trail could include a viewing platform or a resting
Right,
bench
right.
at the end of it. But we all know that, you know, the lane goes up and down.
Right.
And to try to develop a low-impact design trail, we really have no intention of doing any filling or grading. We propose to zigzag around the trees. We don't wanna cut any trees down. We may have to deal with some underbrush. But that design approach will include analyzing where we could develop portions of trails that would be accessible to people.
Well,
with
to that
disabilities.
point, too, we were in discussion this week, Alan, Paul and I, we were talking about the issues at Endine. And we're talking about, because there is handicap parking at the Hawes area, to try and create something where that area is straight going back to the train trestle, where the water comes underneath that train trestle. It's a beautiful spot there, and there's a lot of natural water noise and whatever. It's a very peaceful area, and that would give you actually a decent track for somebody that was handicapped, but you could throw a couple of benches there. It would be pretty nice, and it would be relatively easy to do, so.
So that's an example of how we would like to approach this, and that would be a pretty good long shot. It's flat and even, and so we'll be taking that into consideration when we're working up the trail maintenance plans for Ending as well.
Any other questions or comments?
I would make a motion to issue a letter of support for the University Ave project.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All those opposed?
No?
Okay.
So you have the Saint Street presentation?
Yep, so regarding the Saint Street property, I provided you with a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that I gave to the Community Preservation Committee last week. I don't want to discuss this property with you at this point in time. I don't feel that it's appropriate to be discussing acquisition of property that's currently under review by the commission for an active project. But I wanted to give this to you to let you know that we are looking at the acquisition of the property. We're wrapping up getting an appraisal of the property completed, and this is gonna be a community preservation application that will go, hopefully if there is an agreeable buyer and seller, we will have an application for town meeting. But that all depends on whether or not we can agree on the price for the property.
Paul, what is the acreage there?
7 acres.
In fact, is any of that previously developed?
Yes.
And what was there?
My planning board member, Ernie Paczykowski, told me that his dad lost a car that was parked there while he was working at the bird factory from Hurricane Carol in '54. He said he lost a car there. So there was a parking lot at one time, and historically, we were told that there was a pedestrian bridge, I think.
You can see the remnants of the pedestrian bridge.
Yeah. So, I don't wanna talk about this one, but I wanted to give you this information about it. And it would be our intent, if the town does go forward with the acquisition, that the commission would end up being the owner of the property.
I agree, we don't talk about it.
Right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Yep,
Thank you.
take care.
You can have these things.
Okay, so next on the agenda, treasurer's report.
I have nothing tonight, Al, just
Okay.
reviewing documents that we give.
Al, your report.
Okay, I will answer a question that came up. Cheryl and Joe asked me to look at Dean Street, where there was some dumping.
Just go on, be right.
Okay. And I made a visit,
It's nice knowing you, Joe.
and I noticed some piles of nice shiny new pallets, some old pallets, some old furniture. Looked to me like some homeless person was planning to do something there. But the hitch to the whole thing is, even though this, when you look at property lines, is connected to a couple of the car dealerships, this is, this section of the brook was part of the Superfund site cleanup. And right alongside the brook is one of our main sewer lines in a sewer easement. As a result of the PCB cleanup, we have the obligation to keep that area clean, even though when you look at ownership of lots, it's not owned by the town, it's a town easement, and the end result of the cleanup is we have the responsibility. So I asked Mark Ryan to look at it, and he said he would take care of cleaning up the stuff that's been dumped there. So I also suggested that he maybe could put a guardrail or something across out at Dean Street so somebody can't drive a pickup truck in there and unload those pallets and things like that. It looks like there's more pallets than one individual would carry by himself, so suspecting that somehow they got there other than just by one homeless individual. So Mark said he would see about getting it done. Okay, so that's,
So you don't suspect that it's like adjacent property owners that are placing the stuff there, you think it's some random
I don't know
source?
where it came from, but certainly, there's a couple of homes there, and on the other side of the brook, there's an apartment complex, but it's a long distance away from the car dealerships that are about maybe 300, 400, 500 feet upstream of the area, so I don't think I can blame the car dealerships for putting old furniture and shipping pallets and other junk. There's what looked like a brand new bike frame with the wheels taken off. It was a pretty fancy bike frame. Somebody must have stolen it and took the wheels and left the frame behind. But you know, there's things like that all through this spot. So.
But the pallets look brand new.
Some of them were, and some of them old, you know, and some of them have been there for a long time. So I don't know where they came from.
Did you say there'd be little to no benefit in sending the polite communication to the adjacent property owners, just bring attention to the issue? You know, maybe just, almost like if they're not responsible for it, then they might be interested in just keeping an eye out for it and.
I don't know
maybe-
about that,
Yeah.
but at any rate, whether we like it or not,
The adjacent properties are almost 20 feet above the level. It's a
Yeah,
sharp drop
yeah,
from the back
where
of
the,
them. It's,
and the brook is, the banks of the brook are hammered, so it's not a natural brook anyway. And the bottom of the brook is concrete. So,
Anything else, Al?
no.
Okay, proposal for future agenda items? Anybody got anything? No?
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
So, any of those, any of
Aye.
you